In this video, we're talking about how Sony's gonna rent you a PS5. We're also talking about how the PS3 just got a really strange update in 2025. Then we're gonna talk about how Sony just let us know we're getting Gears of War on PlayStation. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. 3 times a week here on YouTube, you get caught up on the PlayStation news. I try to keep it with the most important stuff first and second, and then whatever I want to talk about as the third story. If that sounds good to you, let me know by subscribing and setting your notifications to all. I got to get into this first news story here because it's weird as hell. So when we talk about why maybe people aren't upgrading from the PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5, one of the comments I see the most from everybody is my PS4 works just fine and money is hard to come by right now. I mean, I don't even have a traditional job and I feel it too. I understand how much more expensive everything from groceries to gas to electricity and everything else is. And the electricity thing is a lot harder to deal with from what I understand over in the United Kingdom, which probably means that Sony isn't selling as many PS5s as they would like because it's a novelty. It's an entertainment purchase that you're not going to make in favor of keeping your lights on. Like if your choice is PS5 or lights on, I'd assume that most people are going to pick lights on because you can't use the PS5 unless your lights are on. So Sony's cooked up a new weird plan that reminds me honestly of how Apple handles it with the iPhone, where like you don't own the iPhone. You just pay into Apple Plus or whatever, and then you pay a monthly fee, you get the iPhone, you keep the iPhone, and then after a year when they release the new iPhone, you can trade in the old iPhone and get it and just continue paying that monthly fee. So you don't own it, but you get to use it. And that's exactly what Sony's come up with for the PlayStation 5. And this is only available in the UK, but I'd assume if it goes well, they'll launch something similar here in the United States or in other territories around the world. The crazy thing is you can rent any variety of the PlayStation 5, whether it's the disc drive model, the discless model, the PS5 Pro. They've got options for all of these different consoles, and honestly the pricing doesn't seem too bad as is, but like you got to do the math and add up how long it would take you to pay off the full price of the console, and then at that point maybe the PS6 will be out, and if this program's successful you can continue renting and get the PS6, or you could save up a lot of money in the background over a long period of time while you're only spending a few dollars in the short term, or pounds. Like it's pounds, we're talking about the UK here. So for the digital edition PS5 you can get that for £10.99 a month, so $11 a month, or the UK equivalent. I don't know how the math shakes out. It seems like around 10 bucks a month, but I would go for the disc edition if you're going to do this because that's only £12 a month, so like $1 more or £1 more. It jumps up quite considerably with the PS5 Pro to $18.95 a month, so like double the price for around double the performance. Honestly, it doesn't seem like that bad of a deal. Honestly, if you've been thinking about getting a PS5 Pro and you're not completely sold just yet, maybe rent one for a couple of months from Sony and then you can see if you like it, and if you do, you could just buy one, or you could keep renting it for £20 a month. You can also rent the PSVR 2 for $18.49 a month, so if you wanted to play through all the PSVR 2 games, you could just rent the headset for a couple of weekends because there's only like 7 games on it, play through them all, and then ship it back and cancel your membership. So that might be the way to go. And then the cheapest option you have is the PlayStation Portal for $6.49. That's another one where you might want to rent it and see if it works with your home network before you go in and buy it for like £250 or dollars, depending on where you're at in the world. But still, I feel like that one, while $250 is not a cheap price, it's the cheapest of all of these. So like if you already have a PlayStation 5, you don't want to try out PSVR 2, and I don't know, you don't want to spend the $250 and just take the gamble, maybe you could rent the PlayStation Portal for a little bit, but that doesn't really seem like the best deal. I'm going to take the entertainment guy mask off. Outside of just testing these things out, like testing out a Pro before you jump in and buy the whole thing, like you can try it with games you actually play, I would not do this. Renting stuff forever is kind of dumb because you're just throwing money down the drain to use something you'll never own. Like at the very least, if you buy a PlayStation 5 for $500 or a PlayStation 5 Pro for $700, I'm converting that to US dollars because I'm not going to like look up all the different price shakedown because these things sell for different prices all over the world. But regardless, at the very least, if you buy one of these consoles for full price, when the new one comes out, you could sell it and make back at least half of what you originally paid. Whereas if you rent it from Sony, all the money you pay, while it might add up to be a little bit cheaper than buying it outright, it's gone. And I bet you'd recoup more if you just bought one and sold it when you're done using it. I used to sell my consoles in college, like when I didn't have any money, and now I'm kicking myself for doing that. It's just nice to have things. Like I still have my PS3. I had the forethought to actually hang on to that thing. I'm so glad I did, because while I don't do it all the time, I still break it out from time to time just to try out some games that aren't available on the PlayStation 5. And while I understand that Sony is going for backwards compatibility with the PlayStation 6, hopefully going going all the way back to the PS1, but realistically back to the PS4, you're going to want to have your consoles around a lot longer than you will if you rent them. I don't think people like renting stuff. It just feels weird. Like, at least to me, if I have the option to rent something or own it, I'll usually choose own it. I know you're not supposed to do that with cars, but I own both my cars outright. I just bought cars I could afford and I paid cash for them. It's just nice that the only monthly payment I have on those two cars is the insurance. And when I'm not driving my Challenger in the winter, I pause the insurance. So I'm not paying for anything while it's just sitting in my driveway covered. It's just funny because like they go out of their way to price these things super high. And I get that it's because components cost a lot and they don't want to sell these things at a loss, even though they'd make it up with games. They're like done with that practice as a whole. So they got to sell it for MSRP. But like, if you're comfortable selling a PS5 Pro for $700 and then you turn around and invent a rental program because you're not selling enough PS5 Pros, looks like you missed the mark on pricing. It's pretty much confirmed that way. I mean, people saying you missed the mark and not buying it is enough justification for people to say that you missed the mark. But like, I think if you have to invent a rental program where people are paying you a monthly fee to get this console because they're not buying it, that might show you, like, look inward a little bit and say, hey, maybe this thing's priced a little bit high, and drop the price. I mean, even if you drop it by $100 or £100, that's going to make it more enticing to people who are on the fence, and you'd probably get more of them than you will through this rental program. But like, I'm not a businessman. Oh, I am a businessman. I own my business, but like, I'm not a corporate businessman. I'm not this guy sitting at the top of a corporation. I'm not going to tell Sony how to run their business, but like, it's admitting that there's a problem with pricing on the PS5 and PS5 Pro. Whether the blame goes to Sony or the UK government in this example, I couldn't tell you because I got enough to worry about with US politics as it is. I just saved my money until I could afford a PS5, but like, that's just me. That's how I do things. Everyone's different. So whatever you choose to do, go with God, buddy. It's your life. It's your money. Spend it how you want. So I was just about to say that your PS3 probably isn't kicking around still, but honestly, just based on how many people still play on the PlayStation 4, I'd say there's a good shot that people are still playing on the PS3. And then I thought about it more and I realized that there's probably a lot of people still on the PlayStation 3 because a lot of the biggest games did not get PlayStation 4 ports, which means you need to keep a PS3 around to actually play them, because if you don't, you're going to have to play them over the cloud. And unfortunately, Sony's cloud streaming tech is not really that good unless you're streaming directly from your console, in which case it's great, but you can't do that with PS3 games. So, you know, you probably have a PS3 laying around just in case you get the itch to go play some games that are unfortunately classified as retro now, which is crazy. Like, I got to talk about the PS2 being 25 years old, but man, the PS3 is getting up there as well. Things are getting rough over here in Michigan. But if you turn on your aging PS3, you'll notice that there's a new software update for the console. And I think this is pretty interesting because on the surface, they said it improves security and performance like they always do. They're just probably cleaning up something in the background. But on the other hand, if you look a little bit closer, your Blu-ray drive in the console needs a new encryption key. And that got me thinking, like, are they doing work on the PlayStation 3 to the point where they'll notice things like that kind of lapsing? I don't know how important the encryption key is. Like, will your Blu-ray discs not work if you don't have the drive encrypted right or something like that? Or are they looking at a way to revive PS3 discs to make them work on the PlayStation 5? It would be very similar to how it worked with the Xbox One and Xbox Series X, where they have backwards compatibility. You can download the games digitally, or if you have the disc for like Gears of War 2, for example, and you put it in your Xbox One or Xbox Series X, it doesn't actually install from the disc or play off the disc, but it uses that disc as a license to allow you to download that game from Xbox's servers. So if they're working on getting the encryption key renewed for PS3 discs, knowing that the PS3 and the PS5 use a Blu-ray drive, how awesome would it be if when they do the emulation for PS3, which we know is being worked on by implicit conversions, that you don't have to buy your games again? Because I just assume, because it's Sony, you know, and they're late to the party with this by a decade at this point, I want to say, that when they actually allow us to play old PS3 games, I just assumed that there would be no sort of mea culpa where they say, look, you've got a lot of PS3 games like I do sitting on my shelf over there. Those are going to work in the console. I just assumed that wasn't going to happen. Honestly, I thought they were going to say, look, sorry, they're going to be cheap, but you're going to have to rebuy them. And that would have been the like fair trade, in my opinion, for how long we've had to wait. I'd just be happy to have it at all. But knowing that they're working on making the Blu-rays work, I think it would be great if they went the extra mile and said, look, if we put these games on the store and make them available for purchase, if you still own that game on a Blu-ray disc, disc, the console's going to emulate that game. I mean, it could work like Xbox did, but how cool would it be if you could just run the native version of the game off the disc? And honestly, now seeing that they're going in and doing a software update that improves the performance of the Blu-ray drive or adds a new encryption key to it, I could see that actually happening. And I don't think it really gets much better than that. It kind of seems like the battle Sony's been fighting internally is looking at the situation and saying, well, the longer we wait, the more PS3 era games are going to come back. They're going to get remastered and remade for PS5 consoles from the third party, but unfortunately, they've left a lot of their best first party games languishing in the dust on the PS3. And I feel like as that console gets older and they start breaking down and not working and getting the yellow light of death, they're going to have to figure something out. So it's good to see that they are actively paying attention to the PS3 in the first place. And I really hope PS3 emulation from implicit conversions is far along because we really need it. But I mentioned Gears of War 2 in that first story because Gears of War is on my mind because this long rumored collection of the first few Gears of War games, so Gears of War 2, Gears of War 3, and maybe Gears of War Judgment, is finally showing its face. And this is coming from the back end of the PlayStation Store. So this is coming from a lot of longtime PlayStation leakers who are worth trusting, but the info is coming directly from the back end of the PlayStation Store. So, you know, it can be trusted because, you know, Microsoft is adding these games to the PlayStation Store. It's kind of like the game's announced without them actually announcing it. And what it seems like we're getting is Gears of War 1, Gears of War 2, and Gears of War 3. There was no mention of Judgment, but just based on the reception to that game back in the day, I doubt they would go as far as to add that. But getting that first trilogy, I'm sold immediately. I love those games. They're some of my favorite games ever. I don't know what the fan favorites are because I've been out of the Xbox ecosystem for so long, but as someone who played these games for the first time on the Xbox One S, I gotta say 3 was my favorite. The cinematics in that game were amazing. The scale of all the action was incredible. It felt next gen and the graphics hold up, so that's probably the one I'm gonna jump into first. After that, the first one's my favorite just because it's horror themed and they really lost that with 2 and 3, but overall, one of the greatest gaming trilogies of all time. The unfortunate thing is this remaster or remake trilogy or whatever they're going to call it does not look like it's coming along with the multiplayer mode. A lot of the tweets and news articles are saying it's going to have no multiplayer, but I just don't see how you could have Gears of War without multiplayer like co-op, you know, because that was one of the biggest selling points of those original Gears of War games, that you could play them with a friend and there were multiple parts in different levels where one friend could go one way and the other could go the other and you'd be totally separate doing separate objectives, and you like, I don't think the game could exist without that. So seeing it's going to have no multiplayer, I would assume that it's just not having the competitive multiplayer, which really blows because those games had amazing competitive multiplayer and there's no way to play competitive multiplayer in Gears of War on the PS5 because Gears doesn't exist on the PS5 yet. So I feel like if you're bringing it over, I understand that you want people to get caught up for Gears E-Day and maximize how many sales you'll be able to make on the PS5 day one, but I wish they would include the multiplayer as well, because then people could get up to snuff with that. Because me, the biggest PlayStation fan ever, I really like the multiplayer in Gears of War. It's a lot of fun and it's very shotgun focused. In terms of release date, what they were able to scrape from the back end of the PlayStation Store is August of this year, and I've seen some people reporting that that means it's going to be day and date, but because it's leaking through the PlayStation Store, we don't know that. We don't know when Xbox is planning on releasing it on their platforms and presumably PC, but just because it's a remaster remake trilogy and how long it's been in the works, like this has been rumored since before the Series X came out, I'd assume that this is going to be a day and date release on PS5 and Xbox Series X. And because Sony is MIA with big first party games lately, it looks like Xbox is going to continue their trend of dominance in games on the PlayStation platform, but who cares? We get to play good games where we want to play them on the PlayStation 5. Not really the worst deal at the end of the day. So yeah, Gears of War collection featuring the first 3 games, no multiplayer, but presumably co-op, coming in August to PS5. I'll be there day one, and I'm looking for people to play through the stories with. So if you see me online, make sure you invite me to your game. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you in today's video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.